Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Sectumsempra by Severitus 812, JessalynMichele, Book 2 of Harry Potter and 7 Years of Chaos. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags, and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Chapter 18, Duels, Dades, Dwarfs and Diaries, oh my. Harry threw open the portrait door for the Slytherin common room and burst inside excitedly. He stood in the doorway for a few moments, looking around the common room that he missed so badly when it went dead silent. Every Slytherin in the room stared at him in shock before abruptly bursting into applause. "How'd you do it?" Williams called. "We're definitely winning the next match," Harry heard Flint cheer. "The heir is back," someone else cheered. "Shut up," Harry yelled, a smile still firmly planted on his face. "Where's your dom?" a fourth-year girl told him quickly, guessing what or who he was looking for. "Thanks," he called to her, already making his way to the stairs. He ran up the spiral staircase and threw open the second-year dorm just as dramatically as he had the portrait door. Harry, Hermione, Theo, Draco, Susan, Ron, Luna, Neville, and Blaise all jumped up and rushed towards him. Thankfully, they stopped about an arm's distance away. "How'd it go?" Susan asked. "You've missed so much homework," Hermione cried. "Did Dumbledore cry?" Draco asked. "Are you back for good?" Neville asked. "Hold on," Harry laughed at them all talking on top of each other. "Merlin, breathe." He looked around the room and saw it had been decorated with green and silver streamers, balloons, and a banner that said, "Welcome back, Harry." "You guys must have been pretty confident I was going to come back," he said with a brow raised in their direction. Blaise shrugged and gave him a grin. "We figured either you would come back or Susan would blow up the castle, so it was going to be a party either way." "I knew you'd be back," Luna said, giving Harry a warm smile. "Thanks guys, really." He was flattered they'd skip classes and make this little party just for him. "They didn't forget you." "We have treacle tart if you tell us what happened," Ron said with a waggle of his brows. Harry laughed and sat on Draco's bed, since Hogwarts apparently hasn't returned his yet. "All right, so listen up." Harry sat, surrounded by his friends, and told them everything that happened since Snape told him someone else got petrified. "You sued the headmaster?" Hermione asked with eyes as round as plates. "I can't believe it worked," Ron said. Draco stuck his nose up in the air slightly. "Of course it worked," he said pompously. "My father is a genius." "Dumbledore going to hate you," Neville said nervously. "Tell you something new," Harry said with an eye roll, snagging a pastry off the overloaded plate. "Where have you been, mate?" Ron asked. "Snape was pulling his hair out trying to find you." Harry hesitated for the briefest of moments. "Here and there," he said evasively, "but mostly Snape's the last couple of weeks." "I'm glad you're back," Luna said with a soft smile. Harry grinned back at her. "I am too." "Susan said we aren't supposed to go looking for the heir or Slytherin's chamber," Theo said with a pout. "Do you even know what kind of historical artifacts could be in a place like that?" "Don't care," Harry shrugged. "Whoever the heir is, if they leave us alone, I say we leave them alone. But if anyone in Slytherin asks, I'm still the heir," he added on with a severe look towards the other kids. He wasn't going to lose the fear and respect of the rest of the Slytherins if nobody else was willing to claim it publicly. Harry had gotten hit, yelled at, expelled, and spent 2 weeks alone in London at the expense of people thinking he was the heir of Slytherin. He'd bloody well earned the right to claim the perks that came along with it. "But you weren't here for the last attack," Hermione pointed out logically. Harry leaned towards the bushy hair witched and lowered his voice dramatically. "It's called magic, Myone." He straightened back up and grinned at her, "and that's my official stance." "What about Dumbledore?" Blaise asked. "I hoped he'd be arrested instead of the groundskeeper." Harry shrugged. "Hopefully there'll be another attack and Dumbledore will at least get fired. I think Draco's dad is working on a petition from the governors to do it." Mr. Malfoy had actually confided to Harry that he knew quite a bit of blackmail on most of the other governors of the Hogwarts board, and he wasn't above using it to get them to agree. "You shouldn't hope for another attack," Hermione said harshly. The Muggle-born students are terrified, and some of them are talking about withdrawing. Not my problem, Harry said. Muggle-borns didn't have an issue with me being expelled, did they? Hermione huffed and crossed her arms. Apparently she didn't have an argument against that. Enough about all that, Susan said with a wave of her hand. Let Neville tell you about the fight he had with Seamus Finnegan. Harry spent the rest of the morning in the dorm with his friends, laughing and talking with his friends. It was good to be back. Returning to classes after lunch, Harry started to regret returning to Hogwarts, just a little. A lot of students came up to him to apologize for blaming him for the attacks, but there were still quite a few who shot him distrustful looks. He didn't mind the distrustful looks, not anymore, but he was beginning to miss the quiet peace of Snape's house. He hissed curse words in Parseltongue at the students who still whispered about him, enjoying the way they paled at the noise. You're insane, Ron laughed during their free period, after a group of frightened Ravenclaws ran off. They were apologizing, Draco said. I don't care, I don't like them, Harry said simply. He recognized the dark-haired Ravenclaw seeker, Cho, and had no interest in an apology from that twit. Incoming, Blaise muttered. Harry looked up from the Transfiguration textbook he'd been copying notes out of. McGonagall expected him to catch up quickly, she'd said, and spotted two of Ron's brothers heading their way. What do they want? Ron groaned. Little snakes, one of the red-headed twins cried, stopping to stand in front of them. And the Master Snake himself, the other one said with a grin towards Harry. What do you want? Harry asked coolly, still irritated from their previous duel. We came to apologize, Little Master Snake, one of the twins said. We had no idea talking to snakes was one of your hidden powers, the other one added with a waggle of his brows that looked a lot like Ron's. He doesn't accept go away, Ron said tersely. The twins looked at each other and seemed to silently communicate something before they turned to Harry with matching grins. If you won't accept an apology, how about a rematch? Why would you want a rematch? Theo asked incredulously. Harry will kill you. The twins shrugged. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. But we'll need a rematch to find out. Fine, Harry agreed quickly, but fair warning, if you summon a snake again I'll tell it to bite you, whoa I. As if we'd used the same trick twice, one of them winked. Especially since it didn't work the first time, the other one muttered. When and where? Harry asked, eager for a chance to finish the duel they'd started. It had been exhilarating dueling two students at once, much quicker paced than just one at a time. And even though Lestrange and Dolohov has stronger spells than Fred or George, the twins worked in tandem and made up for power with pure creativity. Harry was still confident he'd win, but it would be worth drawing it out to see the ideas they'd reveal. The twins looked at each other and seemed to do their silent communication thing again. McGonagall will flay us if we have another duel in the common room. Plus, no snakes allowed in the lion's den. How about our common room? Ron offered with a smirk. Nobody'll say anything if it's Harry. Plus, who would complain about watching two Gryffindors getting their arses kicked? Draco added with his own smirk. Excellent, one of the twins said. We'll do it right after dinner then, said the other. Toodles snakies, the twins called, running off as the bell rang for the next class. Oh, they're going to die, Ron said, happily grabbing his bag off the ground beside him. They're your brothers, Blaise said with a raised brow. Surely you don't want Harry to kill them. Ron shrugged, leading the way towards the defense classroom. They always think it's funny to prank me, so I figure they deserve whatever they have coming. Harry sat down next to Susan, and thought maybe having brothers wasn't as brilliant as he thought it would be. So you won't be mad if I hurt them, he checked with Ron. Who are we hurting? Susan whispered. Fred and George Weasley, Harry whispered back. It's a rematch tonight after dinner. I mean, don't like hurt them bad, you know, Ron said sheepishly. They're prats, but they're loads more fun than Ginny or Perce. Fair enough, Harry agreed easily. They talked about some of the coursework Harry had missed since he'd been gone. It didn't sound like much more than hearing stories about Lockhart killing werewolves and ghouls. Harry, how are you? The idiot in question himself said, walking up to Harry's table. I'm glad you're back. Of course I knew the whole time you were innocent. I must have said it 1,000,000 times. A good kid like yourself. No way you were the heir of Slytherin. Harry looked right up at Lockhart's face and smiled as sweetly as he could, which admittedly was not that sweetly. "Go away before I cut your head off," he hissed in parsley-tongue. Lockhart turned pale and stumbled backwards, so quickly he tripped over Draco's chair and landed on the floor. The Slytherin boys and Susan, of course, roared with laughter. "Mate, I'm going to remember that forever," Ron howled when Lockhart excused himself quickly. "You know he's going to fix his hair," Susan said, wiping tears of laughter off her cheeks. "You're a prat," Draco said fondly. "I'm your prat," Harry drawled back with a cheeky grin. Lockhart returned to the room, his hair once again sleekly styled, so Draco didn't reply, but he did stick his tongue out at Harry. During dinner that night, the whole hall was filled with whispers, not only about Harry and his friends returning to their regular spot at the table, but also about the upcoming duel. A lot of the Slytherins had been on the receiving end of Fred and George's pranks, and were looking forward to seeing revenge. The Slytherin Quidditch team was also hoping Harry would injure them bad enough to put them in the hospital wing until at least their final match against them, even though that was 6 weeks away in the beginning of March. "Get your bets in," Ron was calling down the table. "Odds are 7-1 on Harry winning outright, 10-1 on a draw, and 3-1 on Harry leaving a facial scar." "Why a facial scar?" Neville asked with his brows furrowed. "People are starting to think it's Harry's signature move," Blaise said with a smirk in Lestrange's direction. "Why are the odds better that I'll leave a scar than if I'll win?" Harry asked. Hanging around Ron, Theo, and Blaise had taught him much more about gambling than he'd ever thought to learn before. Theo shrugged. "We don't make the odds, the bets placed determine them. They could go up or down before the duel." "Can I place a bet?" Hermione asked. "You're going to bet Granger?" Draco asked, surprised since Hermione usually lectured them for betting. Hermione stuck her nose up just a bit as she responded, "I figure it's a sure thing, and I need some new books." "Course you can, Myoni," Ron said quickly. Hermione pulled 5 gold coins out of her pocket. 5 galleons on Harry winning outright. Susan poked Harry lightly in the arm. "If you lose, you'll owe Hermione new books." Luna patted Hermione's hand. "He won't lose." "Thanks, Luna," Harry said. "I'll do my best." Hermione and Ron both gave him steely looks, which made Harry think Ron also had a lot of gold riding on this duel. He wasn't sure if he was flattered that Ron was backing him over his brothers, or a little worried by that kind of ruthlessness that would lead him to hope Harry won. He decided to settle on impressed and mentally swore to make it a good show without critically injuring the twins. Unless, of course, they deserved it. Fred and George entered their common room that night to a sea of green-clad students booing and hissing at them. Harry admired their ability to keep smiling, and they even made an audacious bow. "Before we begin, dearest Master Snake, we want to know the terms of the duel." Harry blinked at them for a moment. "What do you want?" he asked. He didn't usually duel for terms, he dueled because he was challenged. The twins looked at each other before giving Harry identical grins. "We want you to help us with a project. We need your snaky powers." "If you win, you just want me to talk to a snake for you?" Harry asked slowly. "Yep." He grinned at them. What a lame thing to ask for. "Deal, but when I win, I want one no questions asked favor from each of you." Harry heard Ron snort from behind him. He knew Ron was thinking about how he still owed Harry a favor with the same terms. "We won't kill anyone," one of the twins said quickly. "And we don't really want to be expelled just yet," the other added. "Oi," Ron called, "what are you saying about Harry?" Harry ignored him and shrugged at the twins. "Fair enough, no asking you to kill anyone or do anything that would get you expelled. Anything else is fair." They both nodded and offered their hands to shake. "We'll work on the honor system here," he said coolly, backing away from their proffered hands. "All right, listen up," Theo yelled. "All bets are closed. Rules of the duel are simple for the Gryffindor's sake. No illegal spells, nothing fatal," Blaise added. "No seconds if Harry is unable to continue the duel ends," Draco yelled with a smirk that indicated what he thought of that possibility. "Are you guys ready?" Neville said. Harry backed away from the twins and had his magic erect a shield around the 3 of them. Harry jerked his head at them as they made sweeping bows at him. "Ready, go," Susan yelled. Harry immediately danced out of the way of two oncoming stunners. Shock them! One of the twins dodged the spell, but the other was hit with a light jolt of pain. Master Snake and his silent spells, the one who was just hit by the spell said, quickly moving out of Harry's next spell. He's a sneaky, sneaky snake, the other one said, sending 3 quick attacks at Harry to try and prevent him from attacking his brother. Can anyone tell you two apart? Harry asked casually, easily flicking his wrist to block their spells. Nope, not even. Our own mother. Harry thought that would be really convenient, to have an identical person to work with, plan with, and to shift blame onto if they were caught. Nice. He lazily sent a jinx at one of them that landed on its target, and dyed the red hair a bright neon green. Oi, the red-headed one yelped, you've killed him. Harry heard the Slytherins all laughing and egging him on, and gave the twins a small shrug, as he continued to easily dodge and dispel their own spells. I'll call you Red and Green, he laughed, hitting Red with a new curse he learned that would make him temporarily blind. Finite incantum, Green yelled, just as Harry hoped he would. He threw a cutting curse at Green and smiled, as it made contact with his knees, and Green howled with pain as it cut through his trousers and sliced open his skin. You guys fight good together, but it makes you vulnerable and weak, he laughed. Yeah, Red panted as he threw a few really creative transfiguration tricks at Harry, one of which included conjuring water and turning it into knife-shaped icicles. Suppose you don't have anyone you'd be cut open for. Fuck off, Harry snarled, sending a much more painful shock towards him, and dancing quickly out of an incoming spell from Green. Ooh, did we hit a nerve? Green laughed, his tone light and his dark brown eyes twinkling with mischief. Does little Master Snake wish he had a twin? Red laughed. Or just someone to call Famil. Harry hit Green with a strong cutting spell that missed his target of his shoulder, but landed on the side of his head as he tried to duck away from it. God damn it, Harry growled. Look what you made me do. I was trying to not cut your fucking face. Green snarled, apparently Harry had struck a nerve. Probably several of them in the side of his head. The twins were getting tired. They couldn't keep it up for much longer, and they were beginning to repeat some of their original spells and tricks. Don't forget the terms, Harry called as he lobbied their weak hexes with freezing rain blown in their faces. If you change your mind about that favor, it won't be pretty. Before the twins had a chance to respond, Harry had pulled hard on his core and put as much magic as he could in his request. Give me their wands, levitate them in place. He considered for a fraction of a second all the ways he'd heard about Fred and George humiliating his fellow Slytherins. Levitate them in place, upside down. Harry easily caught their 2 nearly identical wands as they yelped, and were lifted in the air by their ankles, their robes now flapping down around their faces. Winner Harry Potter, Draco yelled to the deafening applause and cheers of Slytherin. Harry slowly walked up to the twins and twirled their wands in his hands casually. I might not have a family, but I could kill you with a flick of my wrist, he hissed quietly enough that none but the 2 of them could hear. He flicked his wrist then to drop them to the floor, probably rather painfully, and tossed their wands on the floor in front of them. And now you both owe me a favor, he said with a crooked grin. The twins groaned as they slowly made their way to their feet and offered Harry their hands again. That was a low blow, mate, Green said. Heat of the moment accident, Red added. Good showing there. Friends. Harry laughed, which interestingly seemed to make Green, who was already rather pale from blood loss, go even paler beneath his freckles. No thanks, he drawled, but if you ever think about joining a gang, let me know. Harry thought it was Ron that groaned behind him, but it might have been Draco too. Sounds good, little Master Snake. If you'll excuse us. We have a Mediwitch to lie to. Fred and George left the common room with just as showy of bows as they entered it with. Thanks for not killing them, mate, Ron said with a broad smile. And thanks for the new books I'm about to order, Hermione called, counting her winnings. Harry grinned as he watched Ron and Theo hand out coins and winnings to the surrounding students. His grin faded just a bit when he saw Ginny Weasley standing by the wall, clutching a notepad, and glaring at Harry with a tear-covered face. Did you get hit? He asked her kindly. He didn't really care, but he wouldn't feel great about himself if he accidentally hit a little girl by a spell meant for a much older student. Ginny gave Harry a fierce sort of scowl. He realized her eyes were the exact same shade of brown as the twins had been. "I hate you," she hissed. "You're a monster." Harry stood there, shocked into silence as Ginny turned on her heel and ran away. "You're a monster, you're a monster, you're a monster." Harry tried to blink back white spots from his vision as he tucked his now trembling fists under his armpits. "You're a monster." "Harry, are you all right?" Harry shifted away from the person who came up to him and blinked a few times as he realized it was Luna. Fine," he muttered, "just tired." Luna hummed and gave him a disbelieving sort of look. "Professor Snape is in his office," she said kindly. "Snape?" Harry glanced up at his other friends, who were distracted by the mini-party the fourth-year Slytherins were throwing. "If you go now, nobody will notice," Luna said as she danced slowly towards the other students. Harry gave her a grateful nod and took off towards the portrait door, sticking to the edges of the room to avoid drawing attention to himself. He slipped out of the door and quickly made his way to Snape's office. He wasn't sure what he wanted Snape for, but at a minimum, he could get a potion to help him clear his head tonight. He knocked softly on the professor's door before tucking his trembling fist back under his arm. "I hate you, monster, you're a monster." "Mr. Potter," Snape said, opening the door, "come in." Harry took a few shaky steps into the professor's office and glanced around quickly to make sure it was just Snape. "Have a seat, would you like a drink?" Harry thought Snape's voice sounded fuzzy, like there was something covering his own ears. He shook his head a few times, trying to displace whatever was distorting his hearing more than to answer the question. "Sit," Snape instructed, gesturing towards a chair in front of his desk that Harry moved towards automatically. "Are you injured?" Snape asked with his fuzzy voice. Was he? Harry felt odd but not hurt, so he shook his head again. "Are the Weasley twins alive?" Snape asked with a quirk of his brows. Harry nodded quickly. He saw them leave. They were hurt but not dead. "Monster, I hate you, monster." Snape flicked his wand and Harry flinched away from him. He wasn't ready for a fight. He didn't want to hurt Snape. He wasn't a monster. "I hate you." "Drink," Snape said, pushing a vial he'd summoned towards Harry. Harry glanced at the bottle, then back up at Snape, and hesitantly shook his head. It wasn't the orange, dreamless sleep that Snape made just for him, and his mind felt too crowded to recognize what this light purple potion was. "Calming draught," Snape said, pulling the vial back towards himself and taking a sip. "Just a calming draught, Potter." Snape let Harry stare at him in silence for a couple of minutes, before Harry slowly reached for the bottle and tipped it back all at once. "Now, what can I help you with this evening?" Snape asked in a clear voice. "You fixed my hearing. I thought it was a calming draught," Harry accused, rubbing his now working ears. "Was your hearing previously not working to its usual standards?" Snape asked. "You know it wasn't because you did something," Harry snarled. He knew it was a mistake to trust any potions from anyone. He was an idiot. "Monster, you're a monster. I hate you." "I believe you were on the precipice of a panic attack," Snape explained slowly in a calm tone. "It is not uncommon for your hearing or vision to be affected by this. As the calming draught lowers your heart rate, it also impacts the fight, flight, freeze section of your brain and restores any panic-induced symptoms." Harry straightened up in his chair and rolled his shoulders once to ease the tension in them. "I was not having a panic attack," he lied. "I was just mad." Snape didn't call him out on his obvious lie, but just leaned back in his own seat. "Why was you angry?" Harry shrugged. He wasn't really mad. He didn't know how to explain what he was feeling. "Do you think I'm a monster?" he asked instead. "I do not," Snape said evenly. "Do you believe you are a monster?" Harry reached out for the desk and traced the wood grain with his thumbs. "You're a monster." "Ginny Weasley does," he said. "Do you?" Harry shrugged. "I could hurt you really badly," he said quietly, not looking up at Snape. "I could probably kill you." "Would you?" Snape asked as casually as if they were discussing homework. Harry thought about it and decided to answer honestly. "If I needed to," he said. "But not because I'm a bastard, or because I irritate you by asking about your feelings." Harry glanced up and saw Snape's eyes were warm, and he looked completely calm. "Probably not," Harry conceded. "Why does Ginevra Weasley believe you to be a monster?" Snape asked. I dunno, Harry said, feeling more frustrated now. I didn't hurt her, I checked. She just said she hates me, and I'm a monster. Snape furrowed his brows together. Did you grievously injure her twin brothers? Harry cocked his head at the man. How do you know about that? Surely you didn't believe that the announcement of a rematch between Harry Potter and the Weasley twins would stay a secret from the professors, Snape drawled, looking momentarily amused. In fact, Minerva bet that they would win. She's daft then, Harry said smugly. I hope she lost a ton of money betting against me. Snape's black eyes sparkled when he returned Harry's satisfied look. She did. Harry nearly laughed when he realized it must have been Snape she bet against. I digress, though. Did Ginevra witness you terrorizing her siblings during your duel? Harry thought back on the duel and shrugged. It was no worse than the first night had been, and she'd been there for that too, hadn't she? Not really, he said. I mean, they were bleeding a bit, but they offered to be friends when it was over, so if they didn't hate me, why would she? Snape looked surprised again. Little Ginevra Weasley, who barely speaks in class, and gave you moon eyes during her sorting, said she hates you and she believes you are a monster. Harry nodded, feeling sick having it repeated like that again. I hate you, you're a monster, he whispered. That's what she said, and what if she's right? That's what Dumbledore thinks too, right? That I'm evil and dark and a monster. Snape leaned over his desk slightly, his eyes growing intense as he stared into Harry's. Albus Dumbledore and Ginevra Weasley are imbeciles. I have told you this before, and I will unfortunately likely have to repeat it multiple times throughout your life. People will always fear what they do not understand. Their gross misunderstanding of your nature does not change the nature of who you are. Harry broke their eye contact to look down at the desk again. The Dursleys hated me and they kicked me out. I think, Harry clenched his eyes shut as he confessed what had been weighing on him. I think most people will hate me eventually, and then I'll just be alone again, won't I? You believe I will eventually come to hate you and force you out of our home, Snape said, once again showing his uncanny ability to guess Harry's exact thoughts. Harry jerked his head in a slight nod, keeping his eyes firmly closed. Snape could curse him for all he cares, and it would probably be better than having to look at the man as he confessed this horrible weak vulnerability. Accio documents box, Snape called quietly. Harry slowly opened his eyes to see what Snape had summoned, since it didn't sound like he was continuing the conversation anymore. Snape grabbed the black metal box that flew towards him and put it on his desk. He tapped it once with his wand and the top sprang open. Snape dug in the box, his hand entirely disappearing, which made Harry believe the box was magically bigger on the inside than it was the outside, before pulling out a document. Gemino, Snape said, tapping the document he just scrawled on and setting the newly formed copy to the side. He tapped the original 3 times with his wand and it disappeared. Harry watched him do all of this silently, unsure what was going on. When he didn't know what was going on, it was always best to watch quietly. Here, Snape offered Harry the duplicated parchment. This is for you. The original has been filed with Gringotts. Harry slowly grabbed the parchment and stared uncomprehendingly at the first few lines. Title deed for Spinner's End Cottage in Cokeworth, United Kingdom, he read slowly. I don't get it. Snape slowly tilted the parchment back towards himself and pointed at a line Harry hadn't read yet. Owner Harry James Potter, his eyes flew up to Snape's. What the fuck, he yelped, you gave me your house. Snape nodded, calm as could be. I did. It is now your home, and I would greatly appreciate it if you would allow me to continue residing there with you. Harry thrust the paper back at Snape. You can't give me your house, he sputtered. It's yours. Actually, it is now yours, and you can never be evicted from your own home. You could have just said that. You didn't need to give me the whole house, Harry said, his mind reeling with Snape's actions. Would you have believed me? Snape asked. Harry hesitated, and that was all the answer Snape apparently needed. Of course you wouldn't have. Why would you? You were evicted by your blood relatives, expelled from your school. Why would you believe you have finally found a permanent residence based solely on my word? Harry wanted to protest. He trusted Snape as much as he trusted Susan. Maury probably, but he was right. Harry could be kicked out of anywhere at any time. Now you have a permanent residence that you can never be evicted from, Snape said again. The house is yours. Harry looked down again at the deed. Mine, he thought with a fierce sort of happiness. Mine. I can pay you for it, he offered quietly. I've got loads of gold and Griffhook said I'll triple it before I graduate. I can pay you. Snape gave Harry an odd look. I spoke with Madame Bones yesterday, and as she believes that my impending guardianship will be completed by the end of February, you should know that as my ward I would have left you my house in my will regardless. I require no payment. But wouldn't you leave it to your heirs? Harry asked. Mr. Malfoy said that's usually what people do. Snape gave Harry a wry grin. Do you believe I am hiding my many biological heirs from you? Harry blushed and looked down again at the paper. No, sir, he mumbled. But I mean, you're young, aren't you? You could have some and they'd want your house, wouldn't they? Snape snorted and Harry looked up, and saw he was blushing faintly as well, but looked terribly amused. Despite the young age you believe me to be, I am rather happy with my lack of miniature Snape spawns, he said dryly. I apologize if I gave you the impression that I was a fan of children who are not you. Harry cracked a small grin. If they are Gryffindors, I think you'd be okay, he said. As if I would create children that were any less than perfect Slytherins, Snape said with a huff. Perfect potion brewing Slytherins. Potion brewing Slytherins who don't get to inherit a house, Harry said, shaking the deed again. They'll probably poison us, sir. Which is precisely why I shall not be having any. Snape said lightly, Merlin forbid if I have to continuously dodge poisoning attempts by my own offspring. Harry laughed and gave Snape a nervous smile. Are you sure? He asked quietly. I can sign whatever you want so it's your house again. Snape waved his hand and relaxed back in his chair. As I said, I would deeply appreciate not being evicted from our home, but I believe that is a much smaller concern than you eternally worrying that you must appease me in order to maintain a residence. Our home's home. It's really mine, Harry whispered in awe. My home, and nobody can take it from me. They cannot, said Snape. It is yours, which is rather fitting seeing as you have already redecorated. Harry, who had came in the office feeling as if he were worth less than the dirt on the dungeon floors, gave a genuine smile at Snape. Snape didn't think he was a monster. Snape thought he was worth something, thought he was worth a whole house in fact. Thank you, sir, he said. I suppose I'll let you live there still, he added on with a thoughtful look. Gee, how could I ever repay such kindness? Snape drawled. Harry stood up and stretched his back out. Can I have the master bedroom then? He asked with a smirk. Go to bed, Potter, Snape said, not unkindly. I will remind you that while you are not a monster, you are a brat. Harry laughed on his way out of Snape's office, clutching the deed tightly. He looked down at it again as he walked slowly back to the dorm. Mine. The second years were given something new to think about during the first week of February. The time had come to choose their subjects for the third year, a matter that Hermione and Theo took very seriously. It could affect our whole future, she told their group as they pored over lists of new subjects, marking them with checks. I just want to give up potions, said Neville gloomily. Harry very privately thought that Snape would be incredibly relieved if Neville dropped his class. Neville was a part of Harry's gang and his friend, but the Gryffindor boy was terrible at potions. We can't, said Ron gloomily. We keep all our old subjects, or I'd have ditched defense against the dark arts. But that's very important, said Hermione, shocked. Not the way Lockhart teaches it, said Ron. I haven't learned anything from him except not to set pixies loose. Draco and Susan had been sent letters from all the witches and wizards in their families, giving them different advice on what to choose. I think I'll do care of magical creatures and ancient runes, Draco eventually decided. I'm taking arithmancy and runes, Blaise said, so we'll have at least one new class together. Hermione and I are taking care of magical creatures, arithmancy and runes as well, Theo said. She wanted to take all the electives though, he added with a roll of his eyes. They could be important, Hermione said defensively. The classes determine what jobs you can get in the future. Wait, really? Harry asked. How do you know what classes you'll need for the job you want? Susan gave him a knowing smirk. Take what you want, Harry. Fudge only graduated with 5 NEWTS, there's no specific courses for Minister of Magic. Harry grinned at her as he ticked the boxes for divination and care of magical creatures. He thought divination would help him learn more about prophecies, and care of magical creatures would guarantee he'd have at least one class that probably wouldn't require long essays to be written. You want to be the Minister of Magic, Hermione asked in a strangled sort of voice. Harry gave her a puzzled frown. So what if I do, why not her? Merlin, help us, Theo muttered. You'll create an international war. Harry shrugged, but we'd win. None of the other kids looked very reassured by that. Happy Valentine's Day, Luna hummed, sitting across from Harry at the Slytherin table and sliding a chocolate frog to each of their group. Thanks, Luna, Blaise said with a grin. Happy Valentine's Day to you too. This day is bloody mad, Ron moaned, glancing around despairingly at the decorated Great Hall. The walls were all covered with large, lurid pink flowers. Worse still, heart-shaped confetti was falling from the pale blue ceiling. Ron and Draco were looking sickened, and Hermione and Susan seemed to have been overcome with giggles. Lockhart, wearing lurid pink robes to match the decorations, was waving for silence at the head table. The teachers on either side of him were looking stony-faced. From where he sat, Harry could see a muscle going in Professor McGonagall's cheek. Snape looked as though someone had just fed him a large beaker of Skeelgrow. Harry gave the man a broad grin when he glanced Harry's way, which earned him a very fierce scowl. Happy Valentine's Day, Lockhart shouted, and may I thank the 44 people who have so far sent me cards. Yes, I have taken the liberty of arranging this little surprise for you all, and it doesn't end here. Lockhart clapped his hands, and through the doors to the entrance hall marched a dozen surly-looking dwarfs. Not just any dwarfs, however. Lockhart had them all wearing golden wings and carrying harps. What the fuck, Harry hissed. He did not force a dozen dwarfs to dress up for him. He glared up at Lockhart before deciding to use this chance to learn more about dwarfs. That's inhumane, Susan gasped, losing her giggles in favor of gaping at the surly-faced dwarves. My friendly, card-carrying cupids, beamed Lockhart. They will be roving around the school today delivering your valentines, and the fun doesn't stop here. I'm sure my colleagues will want to enter into the spirit of the occasion. Professor Flitwick knows more about entrancing enchantments than any wizard I've ever met, the sly old dog. And while you're at it, why not ask Professor Snape to show you how to whip up a love potion? Harry stood up and gave a loud double whistle towards Professor Snape, who looked like he might try and force-feed him poison. How do we get one of the dwarves alone to talk to us about their rights? Harry asked Susan quietly as they left the hall. He wasn't sure he liked the mischievous sparkle in her eyes when she said she'd handle it. All day long, the dwarfs kept barging into their classes to deliver valentines, to the annoyance of the teachers, and late that afternoon as Harry and his friends were walking upstairs for their afternoon classes, one of the dwarfs caught up with Harry. Oi you, Awry Potter, shouted a particularly grim-looking dwarf, elbowing people out of the way to get to Harry. Hey, Harry called back, I've been looking for you. I've got a message to deliver to you, the dwarf said, ignoring what Harry said. Harry glanced around the packed corridor and felt his face heat up at the thought of getting a valentine delivered to him in front of all the students, including all of his friends. Why don't we talk in private? I wanted to ask you something, he whispered instead, backing away slowly from the large crowd. I've got a musical message to deliver to Awry Potter in person, he said, twanging his harp in a threatening sort of way. Not here, Harry hissed, trying to back away while his friends stifled their laughter behind their hands. Stay still, grunted the dwarf, grabbing hold of Harry's bag and pulling him back. Let go of me, Harry snarled, tugging. With a loud ripping noise, his bag split in two. His books, wand, parchment and quill spilled onto the floor and his ink bottle smashed over everything. Harry scrambled around, trying to pick it all up before the dwarf started singing, causing something of a hold-up in the corridor. What's all this commotion? Came the familiar voice as Professor Snape arrived. Harry started stuffing everything feverishly into his ripped bag, desperate to get away before anyone could hear his musical valentine. Losing his head, Harry tried to make a run for it, but the dwarf seized him around the knees and brought him crashing to the floor. Right, he said, sitting on Harry's ankles. Here is your singing valentine. Roses are red. Violets are blue. You wanted to talk to a dwarf. So I brought one to you. Harry shoved the dwarf off him roughly and sent a harsh look behind him to his friends. I hate you, he hissed at Susan. I'm sorry, she howled with laughter, but now you can talk to him. Harry sent a look of red-faced fury at the now smug-faced dwarf and shook his head. I hope Lockhart enslaved your whole race, he said darkly. Class now, the bell has rang. Snape barked at the loitering students who were still laughing at Harry's misfortune. Snape looked down at Harry, and traitorous bastard that he was, his lips twitched slightly with amusement. 2 points to Hufflepuff, he murmured. Bastard, Harry whispered in Parseltongue. Brat, Snape responded, correctly guessing Harry's hiss. On the way to Charms, Harry glared at his still giggling housemates. New rule for the gang: if any of you sends me a singing Valentine again, I get to crucio you for 7 minutes, he snarled. And that finally made them stop laughing. I'm so bored, Draco whined in the library that evening. Then study, Theo muttered distractedly, focused on his potions homework. Draco ignored him and turned to Ron with a hopeful expression. Wanna go fly? Merlin, yes, Ron sighed, slamming his own book shut. Don't come crying to us when you fail, Hermione called after them as they ran from the library. Harry looked longingly after them for a moment before slumping down in his seat. He really did need to study. He'd missed a lot while he was expelled, and the end-of-the-year exams wouldn't make any exceptions for him. He pulled a fresh parchment out and tried a second revision of his essay he owes Professor Sprout. He wrote a few sentences before stopping to shake out his hand. He glanced around the table at Hermione, Theo, Susan, Neville, and Luna, who were all studying diligently. Well, maybe not Luna. Luna was smiling down at her notebook with long pauses between her scrolls. What are you working on? He asked her quietly. I'm writing to my pen pal, she said, still smiling down at the notebook. Harry glanced at Neville, who had also stopped working to watch Luna, and judged his confused face to mean he didn't understand what that meant any more than Harry did. What's a pen pal? He asked Luna. A pen pal is a person who you exchange letters with and get to know better, Hermione answered, as if on autopilot, still writing furiously on her parchment. Oh, Harry looked back at Luna, who was now giggling at the notebook softly. Who's your pen pal? Luna hummed and looked up to give Harry a wide-eyed look. I don't know, she said airily. I found him in Myrtle's bathroom. What? Susan asked, looking up from her homework now as well. You found a boy in the girls' bathroom, and you're sending a letter to him. Of course not, Luna laughed again. I found this, she waved the little black book around, in Myrtle's bathroom, and now I'm writing to the owner. How do you know who owns it? Neville asked her. Because he writes back to me in it. What? Theo looked sharply at Luna. The owner of the book is writing back to you in it. Luna nodded and opened the book back up. Watch, she said. The other 5 kids leaned in closely and watched as Luna wrote on the page. My friends say hello. After a moment the ink disappeared, seemingly sucked into the page itself. Then suddenly, hello Luna's friends, what are your names? Appeared in the same color ink that Luna had used. Brill, Harry said excitedly, we should get notebooks like that. That's not a normal charm though, Theo said slowly, giving a look to an equally perplexed-looking Hermione. I've never heard of a notebook that works like that. I bet you could make some, Harry, Susan said. Her eyes were lit up with just as much excitement as Harry's were. Then we could all message each other during classes. Classes are for learning, Hermione and Theo said at the same time before Hermione blushed and picked her textbook back up. Well, for the summer then, Susan said with a roll of her eyes. They'd be really useful to have. I dunno what kind of spells or charms I'd need though, Harry said, eyeing the little black book carefully. You can borrow this one and try and copy it, Luna offered helpfully. I don't mind. Someone threw it at Myrtle trying to get rid of it, so really I don't own it anyway. Thanks, Luna, I'll give it back when I'm done. Harry slid the little black book in his backpack and thought maybe if he couldn't figure it out tonight then Snape might have some ideas. Harry sat on his 4-poster after his dorm mates were asleep that night and flicked through the blank pages of the black book. Not a single page had a trace of ink on it despite Luna having wrote in it the last couple of days. He pulled a new bottle out of his bedside cabinet, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot onto the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second and then, as though it was being sucked into the page, vanished just as it did for Luna. Harry loaded up his quill a second time and wrote, "What kind of magic is this?" The words shone momentarily on the page and they, too, sank without trace. Oozing back out of the page, in his very own ink, came words Harry had never written. I am a diary, a preservation of memories from my time at Hogwarts. Who is this? Harry debated for a moment before carefully writing, My name is James, what's yours? The ink was absorbed, then came back in new words once again. "Hello, James, my name is Tom Riddle." "Oh, Luna, you mad, mad witch," he murmured, recognizing the name immediately. "You can't just be Pemples with the Dark Lord." Chapter 19, Guardian Snape. "Excuse me, Professor." Severus looked up from his desk, after one of his second-year classes, to see Potter standing there politely. "Mr. Potter, what can I do for you?" Potter bit his bottom lip for a moment, while Severus waited patiently for him to get his thoughts in order. Potter, it seemed, sometimes had a great difficulty expressing what was on his mind. Unless, of course, it was a threat of some sort, the foolish child had no hesitation when it came to expressing those. "I was wondering if you'd help me with a project I have, and if you would, then I have something weird you can have in exchange," the child finally said in a rush. Potter willingly asking for assistance, that was an entirely new experience. "Is it a graded project for one of your courses?" Severus checked. He would likely still assist him even if so, but he hoped Potter would not take advantage of him for higher grades. Not that he seemed to need it, the other professors all raves about his prowess in their courses. "No, sir," Potter shook his head. "It's a personal project I'm working on." "And we will not be stealing wands to give to house elves?" Severus asked, not forgetting that Potter once offered his own wand to Mavis. Potter gave him a small smile. "Not yet, sir. I'd hate for the elves to be arrested." "Very well, I would be happy to assist you." Potter shifted a little further as the room began filling with Severus, next class. "Don't you want to know what I'm offering in exchange?" he asked with a grin. "No need," Severus assured him calmly. "If your project is legal and it is within my capabilities to assist you, then I do not require anything weird." "Well, you should probably have it anyway, sir." Potter's eyes looked suddenly mischievous as he edged around the incoming students and towards the class door. "It's a real riddle to me," he laughed. Severus got the distinct feeling that he was missing a joke. "Bring your weird item tonight at 7 o'clock, and I will assist you," he called through the room now that Potter was nearly to the door. "Brill, thanks, sir," Potter yelled, turning to run towards his next class. Severus shook his head as the room finished filling with his first-year students. The ridiculous child would likely be late at this rate, and had not even requested a pass. At 7:15, Severus was beginning to feel uneasy. It was not like Potter to be late to an appointment with him. He tried to reassure himself that the child had likely just got caught up in homework or something with his friends, but Potter had a penchant for chaos, and it was more likely that the brat was terrorizing his peers or being terrorized himself than it was that he was late due to homework. Severus sighed at his own sentimentality as he stood to go reassure himself that Potter was simply irresponsible and had not noticed the time, rather than had found himself in some sort of trouble. He entered the Slytherin common room, believing it was the most likely location for the brat, and saw that there were a lot of uneasy glances being aimed towards the staircase for the boys' dorms. "Williams," he called, spotting his 7th-year prefect. "I am looking for Potter." Williams grimaced and shot his own uneasy look towards the stairs. "He's up there, Professor, but he's in a bit of a state. Might be safer to wait." Severus huffed at the implication that Potter in a state was a threat to him. The child has his own housemates convinced he is infallible, he thought as he ascended the stairs. He knocked once on the second-year dormitory entrance before stepping inside. "What is going on here?" he demanded, looking around the room in shock. It appeared as if a hurricane had struck the room. There were clothes, books, and parchments strung across the room, and Potter was standing in the middle of the room appearing furious. "Someone stole Harry's stuff," Draco informed him quickly. Severus turned and saw that the other second-year Slytherin boys were in a huddled mass as close to the wall, and as far from Potter as they could be. "And that was cause to destroy the room," he demanded of Potter. "I didn't fucking do it," Potter yelled back. "Someone tore my stuff up, look." He thrust a photo album at Severus that had indeed had pages torn from it. "And my camera," Potter howled. "They broke it." Severus could now see that Potter's belongings had indeed been rather viciously vandalized. His textbooks had been ripped, and Severus could see ink spilled on his clothing. "Breathe, Potter," he said calmly. "Breathe and watch your language." Potter laughed hysterically as he kicked a pile of his own destroyed books. "This is," Potter hissed something that Severus easily imagined to be another curse. "I understand," he said calmly, "and we will find the culprit. If you will step back, I will repair the belongings that are repairable. Potter glared up at him, his green eyes so overwhelmingly bright with his rage that Severus is unwillingly reminded of Lily herself. Fine. Potter steps to the side and crosses his arms angrily. If it were not for the rage that has strained every muscle in his body, he may have appeared as a petulant child. Instead, he looks like what he is, an incredibly angry and dangerous well of chaotic magic. Reparo, Severus called, clearly waving his wand in a circular motion around the room. Potter watched carefully as his belongings were mostly repaired and moved to his trunk. The brat went immediately to his truck and began digging around in it, displacing the neat stacks Severus had just created. My clothes are still ruined, he snarled, and the book is still gone. What book? Severus asked after spotting the shifty looks the other boys were now sharing. That weird thing I was going to give you, Potter said, holding up a repaired but still stained red shirt. It was a book and you could write to Voldemort in it, and someone stole it and destroyed my stuff. What? Explain immediately what this book was, Severus said sharply. Merlin, the child, had a book in his possession that was linked to the Dark Lord, and he was upset over the destruction of a few easily replaced pieces of clothing. His priorities were clearly very terribly skewed. Severus felt a slight twinge of remorse when he realized he had assisted Potter in purchasing the very clothes he was still inspecting. That meager trunk of clothing and supplies were the first things that Potter had owned. He was justified in being angry they had been vandalized and destroyed. I told you it was weird, Potter muttered. You write in it and Voldemort writes back. Luna found it in the bathroom. I was going to give it to you, but it's gone. Severus turned to the 6 other students, who were now making their ways towards their beds, since Hurricane Potter seemed to have calmed. Did one of you take the book? He asked sharply, eyeing each boy closely as they answered back negatively. Severus believed they were being truthful. Draco, go inform Williams to gather the Slytherin students in the common room, immediately. Draco nodded and took off downstairs. Severus gestured towards the other loitering boys. Did I somehow stutter? Go, immediately. Severus waited until it was only him and Potter before he kneeled down beside the child. We can replace your clothing, he said gently. You likely needed a new wardrobe soon regardless. Potter looked up at him, and Severus could see that he was still furious. It's not the point, he said. The point is that this stuff is mine and someone tore it up. It is mine. Severus took a steadying breath and reminded himself that it is not uncommon for children who own nothing to be possessive over the things they do own. Was your camera fixed? He asked instead, hopping to calm Potter by the proof that his important possessions were repaired. Flash! Severus had to blink back spots of white as he realized Potter had just taken his photo. Suppose so, the little demon smirked. I bet that'll be a good picture. If I ever see it, I will break your camera myself, he told him. Potter just shrugged before gently placing the camera back in his trunk and standing. How will you find out who did this? He asked. I am hoping to terrify someone into ratting out the culprit, Severus told him. Slytherins have a remarkable strength for self-preservation. Loyalty is much a Hufflepuff trait. Potter gave him a small grin. Brill, let's go scare some students. Severus nearly laughed at the confident stride Potter made on his way to the dormitory door. I will terrify the students. You will remain quiet, he stressed. I will not be accused of favoritism when I inevitably punish the urchin who destroyed your belongings. Potter gave him a small grin as he walked down the stairs to the common room. But I am your favorite, he called back teasingly. I have never said that, Severus lied. Nor will I ever say it out loud. He was feeling rather pleased with himself as Potter joined his friends, looking marginally more calm than he had when Severus found him. Severus thought he deserved an Order of Merlin for learning small ways to calm the temperamental boy. Attention! Severus shot his wand off with a bang and a puff of green smoke, effectively silencing the whispering students. He looked around the room, particularly towards the older students, one of whom he was sure had done this, and attempted to make eye contact with each one. I am exceedingly disappointed in one of you, he said quietly in a cool voice. A student's property has been vandalized, destroyed, and stolen. He watched the older Slytherins carefully as he said this. There were a few sympathetic glances towards Potter, but no signs of guilt. While Gryffindor may be the house known best for bravery, I did not expect one of my own to behave so cowardly. Still no reactions from any of the suspects he had originally suspected. He glanced swiftly amongst the other students, and saw that amongst the looks of both fear and sympathy towards a now silently fuming Potter, Ginevra Weasley was glaring at him. "What is that girl's problem with Potter?" Severus was still rather irate that her words had caused Potter to spiral into a panic attack. "She just said she hates me, and I'm a monster." Perhaps the famous boy who lived was not living up to her fantasies. Pity. "Once I discover the culprit responsible, you will be serving detention for the remainder of your educational career," he said, ice-lacing his tone. Potter suddenly hissed something incomprehensible in Parseltongue. It didn't take a Parselmouth to understand that it was a much more effective threat than what Severus had said. Many of the students surrounding Potter, aside from his own friends, inched away from him immediately. It was nearly amusing to see the smallest student in the room causing the others to cower away from him by just a single hiss. "Thank you, Mr. Potter," he sighed. "It would be terribly regretful if I were to leave finding the culprit in your very vindictive hands." A few more students exchanged uneasy glances at Severus' words. He made light eye contact with them all again. "If any of you have any information you would like to share, I will be in my office. If I discover that any of you were aware of this act of cowardly vandalism and theft, and did not report it, then you will share equal punishment with the culprit." He gave them all another severe look before dismissing them and calling for Potter to follow him to his office. As soon as they were seated in his office, he looked hard at Potter. "I would like for you to immediately explain to me every last detail about the book that was stolen from your belongings." Potter nodded and immediately launched into his tale. "Luna found a little book and was writing in it, and I asked her what it was, did I? And she said it was a pen pal, and Hermione said." Severus cut him off. "I am aware of what a pen pal is. I do not require the lengthy and detailed explanation that I am sure Miss Granger gave you." Potter curled his lips slightly as he glared at Severus. "Hermione just said that it was a person you exchanged letters with to get to know better, sir," Potter said harshly. "Loyalty is much a Hufflepuff trait," he'd said. It was remarkable Potter did not sort there with as prepared as he always was to go to war for his friends. Well, it wasn't truly surprising. Hufflepuff is generally though to be hard-working, fair, loyal and gentle. Potter was only one for four. "I apologize at the implied slight to Miss Granger," he said evenly. "Please continue with the story of this book." Potter gave him a skeptical look before nodding and continuing. "Well, Luna said she found the book in Myrtle's bathroom. Someone threw it in there. And she said she could write in it and the owner would write back. So I thought that was brill and want to make some like it, for my gang, you know. And she said I could take the book to try and copy it, and I wrote in it asking what kind of magic it was, and they said, 'I am a diary, a preservation of memories from my time at Hogwarts.'" Potter took a deep breath, and then they asked what my name was, and I lied, because I'm not an idiot, am I? Said it's James. And they said, "Hello, James. My name is Tom Riddle." Severus sucked in a harsh breath. Potter gave him a small grin and shifted his eyes away in a move that Severus is beginning to recognize as guilt. "And," he drawled. "And sir, and nothing," Potter blinked at him in what he must have believed to be a look of innocence. "Potter," he growled, "I would like the rest of the story immediately." Potter shrugged lightly, and then I said, "Hello, Tom Riddle, I'm going to kill you one day," and then I closed the book up and put it in my trunk to give it to you, did I? "For the love of God." "Potter," Severus groaned, rubbing his face wearily, "can you name 5 people who you have not threatened to kill at least once?" "Mavis, Luna, Susan." "No, wait, not Susan." Potter squinted off in the distance. "Have I actually said I'd kill you to you? Because I can't remember." "You have," Severus said shortly. "How long did Miss Lovegood had that book in her possession before she relinquished it to you?" "I'm not sure, not long I don't think," Potter shrugged uneasily. "But she didn't know what it was, did she? So she shouldn't be in trouble." "I am not asking because I believe she did something wrong. I am asking because it is undoubtedly an incredibly dark object that could have harmed her." Potter suddenly looked up at Severus wide-eyed. "Hurt her? I didn't think it would have hurt her." Potter bit his lip for a moment and glanced around uneasily. "Can you check on her?" he asked quietly. Severus absolutely did not preen internally at the realization that Potter trusted him to check on the health of one of his closest friends. "I will," he said solemnly. "Miss Lovegood is in my class first thing tomorrow, and I will check on her then." Potter slumped in relief and gave him a curt nod. "Thank you, sir," he said politely. "It is my duty as a professor to care for the well-being of all students," he said, "not just the Slytherins." Potter grinned lightly before looking thoughtful. "Do you think you can help me make some for my gang, where we can talk to each other? That's what I wanted your help with." "You were going to trade a diary imbued with the memories and thoughts of the Dark Lord for notebooks that you can communicate with your friends during classes?" he asked incredulously. "It's a real riddle to me." Severus groaned and pinched the bridge of his nose, hoping to hold back the migraine he could feel building. Potter's cheek very well may lead to his death one day. Severus briefly thanked the Sorting Hat for giving him. He would never have been able to handle the cheeky brat if he were not originally forced to. "It's a real riddle to me," he grit out through his now clenched jaw. "Potter, for fuck's sake, do you have a death wish?" Severus could hear the grin in Potter's voice as he casually replied, "I have no idea what you mean, Professor, but riddle me this: how did Voldemort put his memories in a diary, and how did it send messages?" Against his will, Severus felt his lips twitch, so he lowered his hand and looked at Potter's smirking face. "Without examining the book, I truly have no idea." Severus grimaced at the sobering thought. "It could be a prank, or it could be an incredibly dark artifact loose in a castle full of children. But I wrote in it and I'm fine, so Luna will be fine too, right?" "I have never lied to you before, and I will not do so now," Severus said carefully. "While I believe that Miss Lovegood will likely be fine, I cannot know for sure until I speak with her tomorrow." Potter stood and gave Severus a look that was much too grim and serious for a child his age. "If she's not, then I need you to come find me, sir. Luna is one of mine, and I can't help her if I don't know if something's wrong." Severus inclined his head in silent agreement. He would never agree with a child's demands out loud, and Potter wished him a good night. Once he was alone, Severus talked himself out of bringing the idea of a cursed diary to Albus. No doubt that Potter would somehow be blamed for it, and Severus did not know if he would be able to handle another crisis of that magnitude again this year. He also thought very carefully about Potter's words. "Luna is one of mine. This stuff is mine." Perhaps the boy would never have been a candidate for Hufflepuff. Was Potter fiercely loyal to his friends, or incredibly possessive? Severus occluded the reminder of the Dark Lord's own penchant for possessive behavior right out of his mind. Potter was cruel, vindictive, powerful, and perhaps even possessive, but he was no madman, and if he was, then Severus supposed the Wixen world had both Albus and Riddle himself to blame. What is a child aside from what they are molded to be? "Miss Lovegood, I would like you to remain behind for a moment," Severus called lightly towards the end of his first-year Ravenclaw Hufflepuff class. Lovegood did not respond aside from a slight nod, as she intently scrubbed her cauldron free of any remaining potion. Severus admired her technique for a moment. She truly seemed to have an innate understanding of the multitude of ways that potion accidents could happen. He had high hopes that the girl would continue with his course to her new year. After the bell rang, Lovegood smiled up at Severus from her desk. "Yes, Professor." Severus had watched her carefully throughout class and had not noticed any obvious differences in her. She spoke in the same airy tone she always used. She moved with her usual waltz-like grace, and she brewed as impeccably as she always had. "How are you feeling?" he asked. If it had been any other student, Severus may have been more subtle, more cunning, more sly. But with Lovegood, he could tap dance a polka, and the witch could tell every individual within the castle, and not a single soul, save Potter perhaps, would believe her. It was cruel and unfair, but useful for his current needs. "I'm content," she smiled. "How are you feeling, Professor Snape?" "I am also content, thank you." Severus truly was fond of this mad little honest witch. "Mr. Potter informed me that you had found a diary where you were conversing with a boy named Tom Riddle." Lovegood nodded. "I think poor Tom is very lonely. He didn't seem to have any friends." Severus nearly choked at the declaration that the diary imbued with the Dark Lord's teenaged memories was very lonely. "He reminds me of Harry," Lovegood hummed. Which actually did cause Severus to choke on his own saliva. "Dear God." "Pardon me," Severus cleared his throat. "How so?" Lovegood suddenly looked intensely in Severus' eyes, and he was caught in her light silver glow. "Don't you see it?" she whispered. "He's so angry and alone, and he's going to change the world." Severus felt a tremor of unease at her declaration. He felt a shade of magic accompany her words, as if she was either willing her words to be true or magic had already declared it to be so. Potter is remarkable, he acquiesced. However, I wish to discuss you. Have you felt different at all since speaking with Tom? Luna blinked a few times, and her once piercing eyes returned to their typical dreamy stare, as if they were looking right through everyone. No, Professor, I feel just like I always do, though I suppose that's much different than most people. Severus studied her carefully once more, before accepting that she did not seem to have any lingering side effects from her encounter with whatever the item may have been. Very well, Miss Lovegood, I shall write you a pass for your next class. Luna gave him a soft smile as she accepted the pass and left his office. He reminds me of Harry. He's going to change the world. Severus, my dear boy, have you been withholding information from me? Severus looked up as Albus came into his office on the last night of February. It was nearly unprecedented for the headmaster to meet with the professors outside of his own office. Albus, flashing blue of his eyes, had Severus discreetly flicking his wand into his hand. I'm afraid I do not understand what you are talking about, Albus, he said carefully. He checked his mental barriers to ensure that Albus was unable to find any of the multitude of things that Severus was currently hiding from him. Albus stood in front of his desk, looking much like the feared leader of the light, as he gazed at Severus with disappointment. Explain this then, he said, his tone even but laced with ice. Albus placed a newspaper on the desk top. Severus took it as an opportunity to move to his own feet. It would do no good to appear as if he were opposing Albus intentionally, but it was just as poor of a decision to remain seated while the air was thick with tension. He slowly pulled the paper towards himself, keeping all of his senses apart from his vision, focused on the powerful threat in the room. Daily Prophet top story. The boy who got a guardian. The writers for the Daily Prophet are happy to announce to the wizarding world that one of our journalists was able to uncover that the newly formed guardianship for Harry Potter was approved yesterday. Our wizarding hero is an official ward of Hogwarts Potion Master, Severus Snape. Severus Snape, formerly accused Death Eater and exonerated spy for the light, filed for guardianship for Harry Potter mid-January, and the Ministry rushed to ensure it was completed once Mr. Potter requested it himself. Of course I trust Mr. Snape with Harry, Minister Fudge said during the unannounced and closed court hearing. Snape has proven to be a brave man who has assisted multiple children from abusive families to find safe residences. Our dear lad is in safe hands with Mr. Snape. We at the Daily Prophet would like to be the first to congratulate Mr. Snape and Mr. Potter on their newly formed guardianship. Subscribe to our daily newsletter for more updates on the boy who lived. Daily Prophet authors. Severus saw the date on the newspaper was listed for tomorrow. I reached out to an old friend and requested advance previews of the paper to be kept ahead of any impending news that might impact our school, Albus said, seeing where Severus' gaze had flicked. I admit I am curious to know why you were granted guardianship of the boy and did not come to tell me. Severus desperately wished he could say that it was because he had not yet been officially informed, especially if the hearing had only ended hours ago, as the article seemed to indicate. Madame Bones told me that Potter requested me as a guardian and I accepted, he said calmly, meeting Albus' eyes and willing him to accept it as the truth. I did not know if it would go through with my past, and I was unwilling to share the information if it may have been fruitless. And you believed it to be so unimportant that I would not want to know? Albus asked, gracefully sinking into a seat across from Severus. Severus weighed his words very carefully. I admit that I believed you would be pleased if Potter was placed me with rather than an unknown family whose loyalties may have been less clear. He knew Albus would misinterpret him. Severus' own loyalties had been made very clear the night that Lily died. He had sworn a vow to protect Potter from all threats even at the risk of his own death. He made no such vow about Albus himself nor the supposed light side. Albus appeared thoughtful, so Severus also slowly sat in his own seat. He kept his wand firmly grasped though. This conversation could go a number of ways. I assumed you would be willing to take up your previous position when Voldemort returns one day, Albus said, shaking his head slightly. I don't see how that could be possible when our whole world will be aware of the boy's placement with you by morning. Severus inclined his head in acknowledgement. That does pose a rather large obstruction to that plan. Internally, Severus was practically shouting with glee. He would never again be forced into his role as a double agent. He could atone for his mistakes by ensuring Potter's continued survival, and more than that he would ensure Potter actually lived. He hoped that Lily would find that a more worthwhile goal than playing spy and passing secrets. "It is a blow to our side, Severus," Albus said grimly. "I do not know if we will find another person so trusted by Voldemort to come to us willingly." Severus thought of Regulus Black, Barty Crouch, and Evan Rosier, all previous Death Eaters, all victims of abusive families, and all dead. He considered all of his students who he has had to help escape abusive homes with no assistance from Albus. "Perhaps we will if we try harder to connect with the students who would be most likely to be drafted by the Dark Lord," he said lightly. "We may be able to find another to take over the boy's guardianship and prevent this press release from airing at all," Albus said with a frown, ignoring Severus' statement altogether. "Molly Weasley would be thrilled to take in the boy, or perhaps even Remus Lupin. You would only have to sign the consenting forms." "No." Albus raised his white brows in surprise as he finally truly looked at Severus. "I'm sorry, my boy, what?" Severus clenched his wand tightly beneath his desk as he stared into Albus' eyes. "I said no, I will not relinquish guardianship of Potter. I made a vow to protect the child, and I believe it supersedes any need of me to return to the Dark Lord, who may not accept me regardless after all this time. Potter stays with me." Albus' tone dropped several degrees as he coldly asked, "And if I say that this decision will end your career here, will end your protection by me?" Severus forced himself to remain calm. Albus, legal protection was no longer needed now that Severus had been vouched for by the Minister of Magic, no doubt thanks to Potter himself, and he could find another career easily with such a recommendation, despite his prior affiliations. Severus forced a blasé mask to cover his features. "Then I shall withdraw Potter and we will leave," he said. "I will not allow him to remain a student in a school I am not welcome in." Albus' cold demeanor defrosted almost immediately. Severus could almost believe his soft smile was genuine if he had not always been so expressive with his eyes. "My boy, there is no need for that. Of course you will remain here, this was just a shock. In time perhaps we will see that this was the wise decision. Certainly no one could teach Potter to walk the right side more than you." Albus reached across the desk and patted Severus' hand with a gentle fondness in the lines of his face. The lack of a single sparkle in his eyes belied his grandfatherly actions. Albus stood and gave Severus another, false, smile. "I hope that you are prepared to protect the boy. He seems to require it more than most." Severus stared at the empty doorway long after Albus departed. "I hope you are prepared to protect the boy," was rather ominous. Severus glanced down at the paper and allowed himself to finally let out a small pleased smile, despite Albus' manipulations. Potter was a menace, a hurricane of chaos, and a magnet for destruction and violence, and he was Severus to protect and guide and follow. And there was not a damn thing anyone could do about it now. Severus carefully placed the paper in his desk drawer and checked the time. He scowled when he saw that it was much too late to find Potter and inform him of the official approval. He would just go find the child in the morning before breakfast, so that Potter does not find out through the morning news. No problem. When in Potter's entire life ever has he made anything simple for Severus? Never, not once. Severus had went to the Slytherin room, hopping to find Potter before breakfast, only to be informed by Ronald Weasley that his insomniac ward had left ages ago. Severus scoured the halls searching for Potter, and the closer to 8 it got, the more worried Severus was. Surely the world would not be so cruel to force Potter to find out that his guardianship had changed through the Merlin-damned newspaper. He eventually had to succumb and enter the Great Hall, where he lurked discreetly behind the banners. His eyes immediately went to the Slytherin table, which was filled with whispers and gossip and flickering gazes aimed toward Potter. Potter, who was hunched down in his seat and was being whispered to by Susan Bones. "Mariello's," Severus murmured, placing an effective eavesdropping spell in place. "Going to be different," Miss Bones whispered. "He's not like your uncle." "Shut up," Potter hissed. "You don't know anything." "Then why are you upset?" Bones whispered back, showing an act of bravery to the point of foolishness. "I'm not," Potter clearly lied. "I'm fucking happy, I'm fine." "This is wicked," Ronald Weasley said loudly, the heir of Slytherin, now the ward of the head of Slytherin. He shook his head and laughed boisterously. "I gotta go," Potter declared, standing abruptly. "I need to check on Sevy before class." Severus quickly made his way out of the hall and followed along behind Potter until they were alone in the corridor. "Potter, I wanted to speak with you," he called. Potter spun around and had such an effectively blank face that Severus was worried he was overly occluding again. "Professor," the child said neutrally, "good morning." Severus ignored his attempt at feigned nonchalance. "I did not know until late last night. I regret that the newspaper was able to infiltrate the hearing and broke the news before Amelia informed us." Potter gave him a faint grin and shrugged. "It's fine, it's done now, right?" Severus very slowly stepped closer to him. "It is done, but if you regret your choice in Guardian, I have the power to undo it." Potter looked up sharply at that, and Severus quickly corrected himself, "which I would only do at your request. No other reason at all would compel me." If the headmaster's veiled threat, and or the target it painted on his back with the Dark Lord's followers could not sway him, nothing would. "Brill, sir," Potter said calmly. "This'll be Brill." "Brill," Severus repeated impassively. "Potter, you don't need to hide from me." Potter gave him another joyless smile. "I'm not hiding, it'll be Brill." Severus watched as Potter turned in a different direction of the owlery and walked off. Severus was clearly doing excellent as the now official guardian of Harry Potter. Brill, indeed. Chapter 20, Basilisks and Boys. "What you get for Flitwick's question on the mixture of gravity and the levitation charm?" Theo asked Hermione on their way to the library. Hermione scrunched her nose. "I don't think I answered as thoroughly as I should have. I explained how the charm warps the molecular cells of the object to cause it to defy gravity, much like objects in space, but I think I should have talked more about the individual cellular structures. What did you say?" "I didn't think to say anything about outer space," Theo cried quietly as they headed for their preferred corner of the library. "I can't believe how inferior Wixen knowledge is scientifically when compared to Muggles." Hermione patted his shoulder consolingly. "I know, but we can exchange those books, and you'll have all summer to get caught up." They had already agreed to exchange as many books as possible. Hermione was ignorant on the laws, traditions, and customs that Theo was incessantly raised on, and Theo had no knowledge at all of any branch of the many Muggle sciences. Theo murmured an agreement as he grabbed their stack of books and handed half of it to Hermione. "Ready," he said with an excited sparkle in his light brown eyes. "Ready." Hermione opened her book to the bookmark she had carefully placed during their last visit and settled in her chair to read. The Amazon tree boa, Corallus hortulanus, is a non-venomous boa species found in the Amazon basin in South America with no subspecies currently recognized. They kill their prey in various ways. Some snake species constrict their prey, some will press it to the ground or chew it to kill it, and some just catch their victim and swallow their prey alive. Not it, she thought with equal parts irritation and excitement. None of the students had any sort of bite marks or bruising that would show if this was the snake attacking them. She wanted to identify the specific snake that was petrifying Muggleborns, but she couldn't lie that the research challenge was a thrill in itself. She flipped to the next serpent in her book. The Arabian sand boa, also known as Jayakar's sand boa, is a harmless boa species endemic to the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula and southern Iran. The species' geographic range includes eastern Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Oman, and Kuwait. Harmless. Next. Of the many fearsome beasts and monsters that roam the magical lands, there is none more curious or more deadly than the basilisk, known also as the king of serpents. This snake, which may reach gigantic size and live many hundreds of years, is born from a chicken's egg hatched beneath a toad. Its methods of killing are most wondrous, for aside from its deadly and venomous fangs, the basilisk has a murderous stare, and all who are fixed with the beam of its eye shall suffer instant death. Spiders flee before the basilisk, for it is their mortal enemy, and the basilisk flees only from the crowing of the rooster, which is fatal to it. "Theo, oh my God, Theo," she whispered fiercely. "What?" Theo's head popped up behind his own book, about serpents only native to the United Kingdom. Oh my God, I think I found it." Theo's jaw snapped shut with an audible sound in the silent library. He snatched the book out of her hands and read the passage himself. "Why do you think it's a basilisk?" he asked with a curious look. "It fits," Hermione whispered. "It must be very old to have been around 50 years ago when Myrtle died, and to have been Slytherin's personal monster. And remember how we heard Hagrid telling Professor Sprout about his roosters being killed? What if that was the air making sure they couldn't accidentally kill the basilisk? But if anyone looked in the basilisk's eyes, they would be dead, not petrified," Theo said logically. "Not if they didn't look directly in its eyes," Hermione said, thinking quickly. "No one must have looked it straight in the eye, don't you see? Colin saw it through his camera. The basilisk burned up all the film inside it, but Colin just got petrified. Justin must have seen the basilisk through nearly headless Nick. Nick got the full blast of it, but he's a ghost so couldn't die again. And Cheyenne was found beside that big mirror on the 4th floor. What if she only saw the basilisk in the reflection? Theo's eyes went glassy, and he stared through Hermione for a moment, like he did when he was thinking hard, before he gasped. "You're a genius," he said. "You've done it." Hermione beamed at her friend and pulled on his hand. "Let's go tell the others." "You guys, Hermione is a genius." Their friends looked up from the intense game of poker as Theo and Hermione ran up to them in the Slytherin common room. "Are you playing poker?" she asked them curiously, forgetting about her discovery for a moment. "I didn't know you knew how to play. I love poker." Harry gave her a small smirk. "I taught Draco over the summer, didn't I? Blaise already knew how to play." Blaise grinned. Stepfather number 4 was something of a card shark. "And Ron's a quick study," Harry said. "Luna, Neville and I aren't playing," Susan added on. "It looks terribly complicated." "Oh, it's not, it's easy," Hermione assured her. "You just have to learn the different hands and learn which hands trump which and learn the different suits and—" Neville laughed at her rambling enthusiasm. "I think Hermione easy and average people easy are two different things." Hermione smiled at what she was pretty sure was a compliment. "Never mind that," Theo said shortly, narrowing his eyes slightly at Neville. "Hermione and I have something to tell you guys." Hermione and Theo quickly sat down and showed everyone else the page in the book they had checked out. Hermione added on her theory on how each attack must have happened. "A basilisk," Ron whispered, horrified, "but those are supposed to be all but extinct. And huge. How would it be able to get around the castle?" Hermione struggled to think of a logical answer, but Theo found it. "The pipes. I bet it's going through the pipes in the walls. That's why Harry heard it but didn't see it." "That sounds amazing," Harry sighed wistfully. "Can you imagine what all we could do with a pet basilisk?" "No," Draco jumped to his feet and pointed an accusing finger at Harry. "You are not going to adopt a basilisk that could kill us with only its eyes." Harry glanced at Susan, who, thankfully, shook her head gently. Hermione has been momentarily worried that the other witch would encourage Harry to try and find it to keep as a pet. She could be just as impulsive and insane as he was sometimes. "Fine," Harry crossed his arms and slumped down sullenly. "This is the tornado of Inferi all over again." He glared at Draco, who had returned to his seat. "One day I'm going to have something amazing like that, and you're going to be so jealous." "Tornado of Inferi," Hermione whispered to Theo. "Best not to ask," he whispered back. She nodded, quickly agreeing. Her and Theo had stayed up all night one night over Christmas break reading about Muggle psychology. Theo had been fascinated by the subject, as Wixen had no equivalent areas of study. They had realized when they read about some of the more severe diagnoses that Harry was probably more than just mad. He was probably actually clinically insane. He was still their friend, and they loved him, but he was crazy, and had crazy ideas, and a pet basilisk or a tornado of Inferi sounded just like the type of mad thing he would try and pursue. "How do you kill a basilisk, besides using the crow or rooster?" Neville asked hesitantly. "We can't kill it," Draco said. "Basilisks are incredibly rare. Potions that use their venom are worth as much as my family home." "So a dead basilisk would be worth more than an alive one," Susan pointed out. "Brill, let's kill it then." Hermione gaped at Harry. "I thought you didn't care if Muggleborns were being petrified," she said stiffly. "Myoni," Harry's green eyes looked momentarily hurt. "I didn't say it like that. I wouldn't care if it was purebloods that were being petrified either. You know that I don't care about that bloodline nonsense." "I don't want anyone to be attacked," she argued. "Just because you don't care about anyone else doesn't mean the rest of us don't." "Who says I don't care about anyone else?" Harry said, now looking angry. "What did any of those other students do for me, huh? Creevy was trying to sneak into the hospital wing to take my photo while I was regrowing the bones in my arm. Justin practically called me a murderer in front of the whole bloody school, and I wasn't even here for that Ravenclaw girl. Why should I care if they're frozen or not? I didn't see any of them speaking up defending me when the whole fucking school was against me." Harry no longer looked hurt, he looked furious. Susan reached over to him and grabbed one of his hands gently, which he almost immediately shook off, still glaring darkly at Hermione. Hermione swallowed hard and glanced at Theo for backup. "Hermione didn't mean it like that," Theo said immediately. "She's just worried. Who knows who the heir might attack next? It sounds like it's just luck that it's only petrified the other students." Harry still looked angry, but less so now. "If just one more person got attacked, though, we could be rid of Dumbledore," he said. "That's all I want, one more attack." "See," Hermione cried, unable to keep silent at such a callous remark. "This is what I mean. You shouldn't hope for another attack. You should be helping us find the heir." Harry stared hard at her and Theo, his eyes flicking quickly between the two of them. "I thought we agreed that we weren't going to get involved with the heir," he said slowly. The other students were all quietly watching the disagreement, except Luna, who was whispering to the thin air because she was just as mad as Harry and Susan sometimes. "We didn't agree to anything," Hermione said. "You said you weren't getting involved, but I still want to know who is attacking the students that are like me." All at once Harry, who had looked tightly coiled and ready for a fight, relaxed and gave Hermione a lazy smile. "My only nothing is going to happen to you. You're the smartest witch in the whole fucking castle, aren't you? No measly basilisk is a match for you." Hermione would have called Harry out for his language, except she was blushing just a bit at his words. Theo coughed lightly and rolled his eyes. "I still say we should kill the basilisk," he said. "Here's here," Ron called with a grin. "Harry, can we?" Susan asked, turning her pouting puppy dog eyes on Harry. "Think of all the potions Professor Snape could make with the venom." At the mention of Professor Snape, Harry tensed up. Hermione and Theo exchanged glances again. They'd compared notes and knew that ever since Harry's guardianship had been officially cleared there, been something weird going on between the two of them. But Harry wasn't the sharing type, so they agreed to just keep watching. Susan was constantly encouraging Harry to talk with her about it, but the Slytherin boy was stubbornly silent, insisting that nothing was wrong. He was thrilled about the guardianship, and he was fine. Which was such a lie that Hermione nearly scoffed every time she heard it. Harry Potter was a lot of things, but she didn't think he'd ever been fine a day in his life. "We aren't killing the basilisk right now or finding the heir as long as they leave us alone, and that is that," he hissed. "We need the basilisk alive long enough to attack one more student so we can be rid of Dumbledore." The rest of the kids seemed to shiver at the way. The room felt colder when Harry said that. They all went silent, and after a few moments, until Ron picked his cards back up with a pointed grin towards the other boys. "Well, if we aren't killing a basilisk, then are we gonna play cards or not?" "We should be revising," Hermione insisted, happier with the topic change since Harry looked more relaxed now that he'd picked up his own cards. "It's only March," Draco said. "We still have eons until exams." Hermione rolled her eyes and pulled a book out of her bag. "I'll study with you," Theo offered. "Me too," said Neville with a shy smile. "I could use all the help I can get." "I'll help you," Theo said quickly. Hermione smiled at Theo. He was always so quick to help Neville with his studies. Sometimes she was confused how Theo didn't end up in Ravenclaw with her. It would have been nice to have someone to sit in the tower with for quiet study sessions in front of the fireplace. Luna certainly never wanted to work with her. They studied quietly for a few minutes, while the other boys played poker, and Susan whispered with Luna. "If you were going to kill the basilisk, though, how would you do it?" Blaise asked. Harry glared at him, and the Italian boy raised his hands with a smile. "I know we aren't going to, but I was just thinking you'd probably have to cut its head off, right? That's how snakes are killed. But it's supposed to be huge, so I bet it's got thick skin." "So we'd use a sword," Ron snorted. "A regular sword won't cut through basilisk hide," Draco said haughtily, "and we shouldn't be talking about killing it at all. They're all but extinct." Theo seemed to be drawn into the conversation. "What about a goblin-made sword? If they can cut through dragon hide, then they can cut basilisks." "Who is cutting open dragons?" Draco shrieked. "You shouldn't just go around cutting open innocent animals." "Draco's right," Luna said softly. "Dragons can be quite sweet if you treat them gently." Hermione stared incredulously at Luna. "Sweet, Luna, are you insane?" "Don't finish that sentence," Harry said quietly, staring down at the cards in his hands. Hermione huffed but picked her book back up. Honestly, if it weren't for Theo, then she'd think all the kids in this school were completely insane. Everyone returned to their previous activity, the conversation about killing a basilisk, or dragon, seemingly over until Harry hummed thoughtfully as he moved some of his chips into the pot. "I'd borrow Draco's dad's sword," he said thoughtfully. "He said it was goblin-made, didn't he? It looked wicked on his wall." Harry got another wistful look in his eyes, and Draco gave him an exasperated look. "You already have a knife," he said. Harry shrugged. "Yeah, but a sword would be way cooler, wouldn't it?" It really would, Ron agreed. Imagine if the supposed heir of Slytherin was walking around with a bloody giant sword. The rest of the kids, except Susan, exchanged cautious looks. I bet Mr. Malfoy would loan it to me, Harry muttered. Draco's suddenly pale face all but confirmed it. Hermione hoped that he would write to his father immediately and make sure he never sent Harry a sword. Harry was dangerous enough with a little pocket knife and his ridiculous amount of magical power. The last thing Harry needed was an actual sword. He'd decapitate someone just to test its sharpness. Towards the end of March, Hermione was starting to slightly regret becoming friends with as many Quidditch fanatics as she had. Exams were only 6 weeks away, and all they seemed to care about was the upcoming Slytherin-Ravenclaw match. Tomorrow's winners get the Quidditch House Cup, Ron explained, as if that made it okay to not study. Exams are more important than a silly trophy, she said back tersely. Theo gave her a sympathetic look, but kept quietly reading his textbook and eating his dinner. Harry, you have to eat more, Draco was nagging. You cannot faint on the pitch. I'm not going to faint, Harry sneered. He quickly glanced up at the head table before picking at his mash. I'm not hungry. You'd feel better if you just talked to him, Susan muttered. Mind your own business, Harry snapped. The other kids all stared slack-jawed at Harry, before quickly turning their attention back to their own plates. Harry never talked to Susan like that. They were usually like two halves of the same mad brain. You said this is what you wanted, Susan said, so quit being stupid and just go tell him how you're feeling. Harry leapt to his feet and leaned down into Susan's face. I do not need to go talk about my feelings, he said nastily. You don't know anything. Hermione watched as Harry stalked out of the hall. She looked up at the head table and saw that Professor Snape was watching him as well and had a peculiar expression on his usually expressionless face, almost like he was sad, but also confused. Susan just looked sad. He's not handling things well, she said softly. I thought he wanted to live with Snape, Neville said quietly. He does, Susan sighed. It's complicated. Did Harry tell you why he's upset? Hermione asked hesitantly. Susan wouldn't tell her anything if she thought Hermione was just being nosy about Harry, but Hermione had seen how odd Harry had been lately, and she was concerned. He was her friend too. He doesn't have to say anything, Susan said cryptically, getting to her feet. You just have to pay attention to what he doesn't say. Theo was once again thinking the exact same thing that Hermione was. Well, that was incredibly cryptic. At breakfast the next morning, Harry and Susan had clearly decided to move past whatever their disagreement had been about. Harry was sitting beside her as usual, and they had walked into the hall this morning side by side and whispering gleefully. You guys will definitely win, Susan smiled at Harry and Draco as she subtly slipped a few sausages on Harry's plate. I can feel it. I can't, Luna said with an uncharacteristic frown. Are you sure the match is today? The Nargles said it is. Harry, who usually listened intently about Luna's Nargles, gave her a crooked grin. Nargles might be wrong this time, Luna. Flint's only been talking about it all night. Luna hummed but didn't disagree. Hermione wondered how Luna had slept in the Ravenclaw Tower and not heard the constant conversations about today's match. Hermione hadn't even been able to read in the common room because of the constant Quidditch match. Perfect conditions, Ron said cheerfully, making a few notes on a parchment in front of him. Not a cloud in the sky. What are the current odds? Blaise asked. Ron scribbled a few more notes on the parchment and studied it carefully. Conditions improved Slytherin's odds, but Chang has only lost 2 matches in the last 2 years, so it's pretty tight, about 2-1 in Ravenclaw's favor. Hermione thought that if Ron would only put as much effort into his studies as he did his gambling, that he'd be a much better student. So if someone bet 5 galleons on Slytherin, how much would they win? Hermione asked them. She made 7 galleons when Harry won his duel against the Weasley twins and was able to purchase 6 new books. If she used the original 5 galleons, she still had to bet again, and she'd like to buy one of the portable bookcases she saw over the summer at Diagon Alley. 2-to-1 odds means you'll win 2 galleons for every 1 galleon you bet, Theo explained. So if you bet 5 galleons again and Slytherin wins, then you'll get your bet of 5 back plus 10 more. If you put your 5 galleons on Ravenclaw and they win, then you get your original bet back plus 2 galleons. When the latest I can place a bet? Hermione asked excitedly. She didn't like to make a habit of gambling, but Harry and Draco were excellent flyers. Harry had caught the snitch last game with a shattered arm, and his contributions to the game were worth 150 points. Plus, 15 galleons would be nearly enough for the bookcase she wanted. Then she wouldn't have to decide which books to leave at home every year. "You have until Madame Hooch blows the whistle," Ron told her. "Excellent." Hermione hurriedly packed her bag. "I've got to run to my dorm for my money. I'll meet you guys in the stands." Theo gave her a sweet smile that made her cheeks turn the faintest shade of pink. "I'll save you a seat," he promised. Hermione was smiling all the way through the empty corridors. She scrambled in her trunk for her coin purse and rushed out of the Ravenclaw Tower. Hermione wasn't as concerned with her looks as most girls her age were. She thought it was ridiculous to waste so much time on things as silly as hair and makeup, but she thought of Theo's soft brown eyes and stopped to check her reflection in a suit of armor outside the library on her way to the pitch. She just didn't want her hair to look ridiculous, or have a piece of strawberries stuck in her teeth, or something. The last thing Hermione saw that day were the large yellow eyes of the biggest snake she'd ever even imagined could exist.